Imagine yourself standing on a narrow ledge, the wind tugging at your clothes, tugging at your every thought. Below, a yawning chasm of uncertainty stretches farther than the eye can see, its depths shrouded in half-light and your own unspoken doubts. Your heart pounds in your ears like a tribal drum summoning an ancient verdict, surrender or leap. Every breath tastes like ash, every moment feels suspended between the agony of what has been lost and the faint possibility that something new might yet be born from these ruins. The horizon offers no promise of sunrise, only the yawning question of how much more you can bear before the weight of circumstance presses you past the point of return. You've scoured the maps of your options, but each route led to a dead end, each effort rebounded off an invisible wall of disappointment. You're stripped bare, no illusions left, no backup plans, just the raw nerve of survival exposed to the elements of fear and regret. In this moment, rock bottom feels like a threat, the final line you can't cross without losing yourself forever. And yet, paradoxically, it beckons like a gateway, an unmarked door promising transformation if you can summon the courage to step through. Have you ever been there, on that jagged edge where hope seems like the cruelest joke and every instinct screams to close your eyes and let go? In that charged silence, you might feel a strange kinship with the void itself, a fleeting comfort in the notion that nothing else can hurt you if there is nothing left to lose. And yet that very surrender is a siren song, luring you into the abyss of permanent defeat under the guise of temporary relief. What if the true danger lies not in hitting rock bottom, but in believing that rock bottom is an endpoint rather than a rough draft awaiting your hand to rewrite it? If you've ever felt the magnetic pull of giving up, you know how it coils around your mind, whispering that the only escape from pain is to cease your struggle. But beneath that venomous suggestion lies a quieter voice, almost imperceptible, asking a different question. If everything you thought you were has fallen away, who might you become when you finally stop fighting the weight of your own doubts? That hidden spark, so small you might almost miss it, lurks in the shadow of your greatest despair. It doesn't roar or demand attention. It flickers like a candle in a draft, eager to be nurtured but fearful of the gale-force winds of your own defeatist thoughts. In the hush between two heartbeats, it reaches out to you, wondering if you'll refuse its invitation. What does it whisper? Perhaps a single word, begin. Perhaps a breath of possibilities so faint you could dismiss it as a trick of your own mind. Yet that whisper carries the gravity of every second you've clung to life, every shard of resilience you've scraped from the walls of your suffering. Rock bottom was never meant to be your tombstone. It's the raw, unfinished canvas where you can sketch a new beginning in strokes bold enough to cover the scars of everything that came before. As you stand there, wounded and weary, the moment stretches like a question without an answer. Will you heed that faint spark and risk the terror of trying again? Or will you fold into the darkness, accepting that this, right here, right now, is the final chapter of your story? The choice feels impossibly heavy, as though the scales of fate tilt under the weight of your indecision. Yet in the trembling hush before the verdict, a tiny shift can change everything, a breath drawn not in resignation, but in defiance of the idea that you have nothing left to give. It's as if the universe itself pauses to watch whether you will sink or rise, and in that pregnant interval, you discover that the only true failure lies in refusing to test your wings. There is no handbook for this moment, no guiding voice that can guarantee safe passage. You navigate by flickers of memory, times you surprised yourself, times you felt the pulse of possibility surge through your veins. You recall the first hesitant steps you took when fear threatened to freeze you in your tracks, and in that recollection, you glimpse the blueprint for your next move. It might be unsteady, it might even be desperate, but it will carry the authenticity of someone who has nothing left to hide behind. Clarity often emerges amid crisis, sharp and unfiltered, revealing truths you couldn't afford to see when comfort was still an option. And once that clarity ignites, the threat of rock bottom transforms into an invitation to craft a life that bears the imprint of your survival. What does it mean to rise after feeling you've fallen too far to climb? It means acknowledging every fractured piece of yourself and deciding they're worth gathering, worth repairing, worth using as the foundation for something stronger. It means turning away from the tempting myth that some people are simply not built for resilience, that a single defeat is the stamp of permanent inadequacy. The moment you embrace your own capacity to rebuild, you rewrite the very definition of rock bottom. No longer is it a site of defeat, but an alchemical furnace in which your lowest point becomes the catalyst for your most audacious transformation. Still, the precipice calls, pulling your bravery. The void murmurs its familiar lullaby of oblivion. And yet, if you dare to listen closely, you'll hear that subtle counterpoint, the whisper of beginnings, the hum of possibility. This whisper is your unmined resource, the unexpected rescue you didn't even know you were searching for. It beckons you not with promises of instant victory, but with the radical idea that you can start again, unafraid of the past that brought you here. Your task in this moment is to recognize that whisper, to feel its gentle insistence, and to answer with a breath that carries both gratitude for having survived and resolve to continue. So I ask you now, have you ever felt that sinking sensation, that undeniable gravity pulling you toward an end you've convinced yourself you deserve? When the world fell silent and every option seemed exhausted, did you hear the faint murmur of something greater, something that dared you to begin again? Listen closely, because understanding that whisper is the first step toward an extraordinary rescue, one that begins not in the brilliance of a sudden epiphany, but in the quiet courage of a single breath taken against the wind. What will you do with this moment when every other choice has fallen away? The answer lies within the echo of your own trembling resolve, waiting to be shaped into the extraordinary story of your next ascent. Querito espectador. Confire se você ainda está inscrito no canal. Às vezes, a inscrição pode ser cancelada automaticamente, então é sempre bom verificar. Aproveite e se torna membro do canal. Como membro, você terá benefícios incríveis, como assistir aos nossos conteúdos semanais. Além disso, você pode apoiar nosso trabalho sendo financiador do canal com value. Sua ajuda-nos permite investir em ferramentas melhores e elevar a qualidade de produção dos nossos conteúdos. Junte-se a nós nessa jornada e faça parte de nossa comunidade. E compartilhe gente aí nos comentários de que cidade você está escutando esta história e que horrors são por aí agora. Part 1. The abyss of despair. You step off that narrow ledge in your mind, and suddenly you're sinking into a vast, cold void, no firm ground beneath your feet, only the echo of every painful memory you've tried to bury. It's as though you've traded one prison for another, swapping tight walls of circumstance for endless emptiness. In that instant, the weight of everything you've lost presses down like a glacier, cold and relentless, threatening to crush the spark of movement from your soul. Despair isn't just sadness, it is the gray fog that settles in your bones, convincing you that forward motion is a cruel illusion. In this abyss, time stretches and warps. Minutes feel like hours, and every second offers a choice, press on or surrender. You notice your breath growing shallow, chest tightening like a vice. You wonder how long before hope simply erodes into a distant memory. Yet strangely, there's a certain familiarity in this place, an odd comfort in knowing that numbness guarantees no new pain. The danger is that you start to mistake this hollow stillness for safety, forgetting the vitality that once pulsed beneath your skin. Philosophers have likened despair to a signal flare fired from deep within our psyche, a warning that something has fractured so profoundly that it can no longer be ignored. Viktor Frankl, who endured unfathomable suffering, taught that anguish carries a message about our unmet needs or neglected values. In other words, despair whispers truths we've long evaded. But when that whisper is silenced by self-protective numbness, through scrolling feeds until the eyes blur or drowning darkness in drink and distraction, it becomes a trap door into permanent defeat. You might recognize the pattern. A little setback arrives, you brace for impact, then another, and another, until suddenly you're staring at a jagged bottom. The mind, desperate for relief, seizes the first salve it can find, be it isolation, mindless consumption, or self-blame. In this state, pain feels omnipotent. It's a storm that colors every thought, every memory, until you can't tell truth from catastrophe. You convince yourself that if nothing you do changes the forecast, why bother trying at all? Yet there's a paradox buried in that conviction. The very act of numbing out demands energy, an exhausting exertion of will to suppress feelings, to keep the floodgates closed. Ironically, surrendering to peaceful apathy is more taxing than simply sitting with the discomfort. You exhaust yourself resisting emotion, as though trying to hold back the tide with bare hands. Behind the heaviness lies a hidden invitation. What if you allowed the storm to pass through you, rather than battling its every gust? Lean into that question for a moment. Imagine the body of water turning over debris, revealing hidden stones and slippery currents. In the same way, your despair can dredge up buried truths, unspoken regrets, neglected dreams, values you forgot you held dear. These revelations are discomforting, yes, but they're also catalytic. They illuminate where your life has diverged from your own compass. For as long as you keep those truths submerged, they'll corrode you from within, feeding a cycle of self-doubt that seems undefeatable. Consider the wanderer in a desert lost beneath a cloudless sky. Dehydration, heat, and disorientation blur the line between reality and hallucination. When the wanderer finally collapses onto scorching sand, it appears as an end, only to become the moment before rescue. The collapse breaks illusions of invincibility, strips away pride, and opens the mind to seek help. Similarly, your own collapse into despair can be the prelude to reaching for a lifeline you once dismissed as unnecessary or shameful. This is where the trap hides, the belief that despair is an end rather than a signal. You mistake the symptom for the disease itself, and in doing so, you condemn yourself to a longer illness. But what if you saw it as an alert, a flashing beacon urging you to pause, look inward, and recalibrate? Suddenly, the very thing you feared most becomes the trigger for transformation. The abyss shifts from a coffin to a crucible, forging insights you could never glean from a place of comfort. Of course, recognizing this shift requires courage. It asks you to face feelings you've worked so hard to ignore. The thought of opening that door again can scare you more than any external threat. You worry, what if I can't handle what I find? What if the truths waiting for me are too painful? These questions echo like wind whistling through a derelict house. But remember, an empty house, no matter how dilapidated, invites renovation. Nothing more fragile than a space stripped of pretense, nothing more promising either. So where do you start? You begin by noticing when your go-to escape tactics kick in. The late-night scrolling, the empty-calorie snacks, the avalanche of self-critique. Recognize that these are coping strategies, some more helpful than others, but none will reveal the hidden fissures in your foundation. Make a small pact with yourself. The next time you feel that urge to tune out, pause. Take a breath. Acknowledge the discomfort without acting on it. In that pause, you reclaim agency and let the raw data of your experience surface. Write it down if you can. Scribble a sentence or two about what you're feeling. No need for polished prose, bullet points or single words will do. Angry. Helpless. Exhausted. That tiny act, of all the distractions you could choose, is the most radical. It says, I'm still here. I see you, pain. It's like turning a flashlight on in a dark cellar. Suddenly, you spot the broken beam or the rotting floorboard. Knowledge of the hazard empowers you to step more carefully or to call in reinforcements for a repair. But this process isn't a one-off fix. It's a practice, an art of tending your inner landscape with curiosity rather than contempt. Over time, you develop a sixth sense for when you're slipping into self-numbing. You begin to sense the faint tremor behind the stifled sobs or the frantic scroll. And with that awareness, you open a space for choice. You can still take that drink, browse that feed, or lash out at yourself, but now you see it clearly for what it is and can decide whether it's worth the cost. In fact, shifting from reaction to response is the very essence of transformation. You move from being a helpless victim of despair to an active participant in your own life. Imagine planting a sapling in brittle soil and nourishing it a little each day. First you clear the rocks, then you water it, then you shield it from frost. Your mind is the soil, and your attention is the water. Consistent tenderness, even in tiny doses, softens the hardest ground. Before long, unexpected shoots of possibility emerge. This is why despair, for all its terror, carries a hidden gift, the chance to rebuild your world from its underpinnings rather than tinkering at the familiar surface. Think of a house so riddled with termites that remodeling the walls and repainting the facade can only mask the damage temporarily. You must excavate, inspect the frame, and replace what's rotten. Painful, yes, but once the bones are sound, you can design a home that truly reflects who you are, not what you once pretended to be. Yet the key to refusing permanent defeat lies in the stories you tell about yourself in that excavation. If you whisper, I'm broken beyond repair, you'll pick up each plank with shaking hands and slam it back down. But if you murmur, I'm discovering what needs mending, you'll find the grit to set each beam right, however clumsy your first attempts. Language matters, it shapes our reality. Naming your despair as a teacher rather than an executioner changes how you meet it and what you make of it. Here's a simple practice to begin. When the next wave of hopelessness washes over you, place a hand over your heart. Feel the steadiness of that beat, the persistence of life. Speak aloud or whisper, I'm in pain, but I'm not broken. I'm here, and I choose to see what this moment is trying to show me. It's almost too plain to be profound, yet in its simplicity lies power. You interrupt the narrative of doom and reclaim the narrative of exploration. Over time, these small acts create a ripple effect. You start to notice cracks of light in your darkest moments, glimpses of insight that tug at your curiosity. You catch yourself thinking, what if this is pointing me toward a possibility I never considered? And with that question, the abyss loses its finality and becomes a doorway. You begin to step through, not knowing exactly what lies on the other side, but trusting that the journey itself will teach you what you need to know. So ask yourself now, when you've numbed out, what truth are you avoiding? What hidden need or longing have you stuffed so deep that it has mutated into pain? Naming it is the first act of defiance against despair's claim that you are powerless. Admit to yourself the presence of that truth, however awkward or overwhelming it feels. Give it a name, however provisional. And then listen for its whispers, because on the other side of that naming lies the path to genuine transformation. Before you move on, take a moment to feel the weight of this realization. You've been viewing despair as a tomb when it's actually an unpainted canvas. The abyss you feared is also the ground from which you will build. And now that you've begun to recognize the shape of the truths you've been dodging, you're ready to confront the next challenge, the echoes in your mind that distort those truths and keep you chained to rock bottom. What voices are speaking in that void, and how can you learn to tell the difference between destructive echoes and genuine intuition? The answer awaits just beyond the walls you've built, and in the next part, you'll discover the tools to quiet the cacophony and finally hear your own steady guidance. You find yourself standing at the threshold of that inner cavern, its ceiling lost in shadow, its floor littered with the detritus of every harsh word you ever told yourself. In this hollow, your doubts echo like fractured glass, each shard of criticism ricocheting until it cuts deeper than the original wound. You hear, "You're not enough, you'll never get out of this, why even try?" The voices swarm, overlapping in a deafening static that drowns out any gentle whisper of hope you might still carry. It feels as though you've been cast into a canyon with unseen walls, and every step you take sends your own insecurities crashing back at you, louder, more insistent. This is the realm of inner echoes, the distorted reflections of fear, self-criticism, and misguided hope that keep you tethered to rock bottom long after the initial fall. These internal monologues can seem so familiar, like an old friend whose company you can't escape. They claim to protect you, warning you against further disappointment. But in truth they're jailers, locking you into a narrative of defeat. The mind, in its desperate bid for safety, amplifies past failures and exaggerates future threats, crafting a hysterical sitcom of doom where you always play the tragic hero. Under its sway, a single misstep becomes evidence of irreparable doom. That missed deadline morphs into a prophecy that you'll never succeed. That awkward conversation becomes proof you're unlovable. Every echo reinforces the belief that rock bottom isn't a moment to transcend but a place to settle in and unpack your fears like worn-out luggage. Yet philosophers and psychologists alike warn us that our thoughts are not gospel. Cognitive behaviorists speak of distortions, black and white thinking, catastrophizing, emotional reasoning, that serve as mental shortcuts with disastrous consequences. Carl Jung would point to the shadow self, the unacknowledged parts of our psyche projecting inner conflict onto our self-talk. Even ancient Stoics reminded us, it's not events that disturb us, but the judgments we place upon them. When you accept every echo as absolute truth, you hand over your power. You are no longer the author of your story but a passive recipient of a script penned by fear. The real question becomes, will you continue to trust these nagging echoes, or will you learn to question their source? To diagnose this vibration chamber of self-sabotage, start by considering its mechanics. Each echo is born of a circumstance, real or imagined, then magnified by habit and fear. Trauma, judgmental upbringing, societal pressures, these are the amplifiers that warp a neutral thought into a catastrophe. Picture a whisper in a dark room, unsettling at first, but manageable. Now imagine a room built of mirrors and speakers, endlessly multiplying that whisper until it's a roar. The echoes you hear aren't evidence of truth, they're evidence of a looped recording. Recognizing the playback is the first step toward flipping off the switch. It's not about silencing your mind entirely, but about separating the static from the signal. Think of someone who's hit their lowest point. They lie awake at night and every failure parades across their consciousness like a taunting carnival. You blew it, one voice snarls. You always will, another echoes. In this mind stage, Courage seems a distant memory, coaxed away by the repetition of self-doubt. When you're drowning under these tapes, it's no wonder you feel compelled to sink deeper. Giving up seems easier than facing the relentless chorus. Yet beneath that oppressive concert of criticism lies a single, quiet intuition begging for airtime. But how do you sift through the noise to hear it? The key lies in developing a stance of witness rather than participant. When a thought surfaces, "You're worthless, nobody cares," pause for a breath. Imagine yourself stepping back, becoming the observer of your own mind. Label the thought, "There's self-criticism again," or "Here comes fear." Giving it a name robs it of covert power. Suddenly it's not an unassailable truth, but a visitor you can choose to engage or excuse. This simple act of labeling interrupts the autopilot reaction, creating a tiny gap, a moment of choice, where you can decide whether to believe or to release. Mindfulness teachers describe this as the space between stimulus and response. In that interstitial zone resides your freedom. You can cultivate it with practices as simple as pausing to notice the breath whenever you catch your thoughts spiraling. Or journaling a single line, "I'm noticing a harsh judgment." That sentence is a lighthouse shining through fog, guiding you back to solidity. Over time, the muscle of self-observation strengthens, and the echoes lose their omnipotence. You begin to see them as old recordings playing on a loop, not prophetic announcers of your fate. Socratic self-inquiry offers another powerful tool. When a destructive voice pipes up, "You'll never recover," ask it, "What evidence do I have for this claim? What am I ignoring?" You may discover that the statement crumbles under scrutiny, or that its premise rests on outdated beliefs you've long since outgrown. This intellectual cross-examination not only weakens the echo but also clarifies your real concerns, perhaps a fear of rejection or a need for control, that you can address directly. The ironic twist is that these voices often masquerade as protectors, telling you to play it safe, to hide your vulnerability. But genuine guidance invites growth, not stagnation. Fear of losing these internal narratives is common. They feel like landmarks, predictable, even if bleak, while a fresh perspective seems foreign and risky. You worry, "If I discard these voices, what remains? Who will I be?" This is precisely the turning point. The question isn't whether you can live without the echoes you know, it's whether you can live with them dictating every move. Liberation lies not in eliminating thought, but in choosing which voices to amplify. Genuine intuition often speaks in a softer tone, a gentle nudging toward possibility, a quiet conviction that I can try again. Distinguishing that inner friend from the shouting crowd requires practice, but it's the difference between being trapped in rock bottom and climbing out. Now, imagine sitting in that echo chamber again, but this time with new tools, a notepad to jot down repeating thoughts, a few moments of mindful breathing to create distance, Socratic questions to expose faulty logic. Notice how the echoes shrink, how space opens between one thought and the next. In that space, you can listen for a calmer voice, one that says, "What's the next reasonable step?" or "I'm allowed to be flawed and still move forward." That voice is your authentic guidance, not a delusion but a grounded source of wisdom shaped by your deepest values and highest aspirations. So I invite you to pause right now and ask yourself, which inner voice has most silenced your courage? Was it the critic insisting you're unworthy? The fearful prophet predicting perpetual failure? Or perhaps the misguided optimist promising miracle cures if only you'd stop being so negative? Name it. Give it form. See it for what it is, a habit of thought, not an immutable decree. And in that act of naming, you reclaim the storyteller's pen. You decide which script to follow. As you step away from this reflection, remember that discerning truth amid the cacophony is a practice, not a one-time victory. With each moment of awareness, you weaken the echo's stranglehold and strengthen your capacity for authentic choice. The next challenge lies just ahead. Once you've grown accustomed to distinguishing genuine intuition from destructive feedback, how will you turn crisis into opportunity? How will you unearth the hidden gift within your darkest moments? In the upcoming part, you'll discover practical strategies to harness that insight and propel yourself toward transformation. Stay with this question, and be ready to listen for the whisper of possibility that awaits beyond the noise. Part 3. The hidden gift. As you step beyond the murmur of destructive echoes and brace yourself for another round of struggle, a subtle shift begins inside you. The raw, jagged edges of your despair start to glint, almost imperceptibly, like rough gemstones catching a stray beam of light. What once felt like a wound that bled despair now offers a strange invitation. Beneath the pain, there lies a treasure. You may have come to this moment expecting only more suffering, but the hidden gift of crisis reveals itself when you learn to look with new eyes. It arrives as a quiet revelation, not a flashing billboard. You might be folding laundry, staring at a blank page, or sitting in traffic when suddenly an unexpected insight flares to life. In that instant, your hopelessness yields to curiosity. What if this agony isn't just punishment but a map? The contours of your pain sketch pathways you never noticed before, paths to values you abandoned, dreams you stifled, strengths you overlooked. The landmine of despair metamorphoses into a treasure map, if you dare to follow its cryptic markings. We recoil from pain, convinced it only corrodes the soul. Yet philosophers from Nietzsche to Frankl remind us that suffering, when confronted, bears gifts of equal weight. Nietzsche dared us to become who we are by embracing the totality of our experience. Frankl urged us to find meaning even in the abyss. Their wisdom converges on one paradox: crisis, for all its brutality, carves out the space where genuine transformation can take root, if we'll excavate its lessons rather than collapse under its force. Consider the caterpillar wedged in its chrysalis. To the untrained eye, its confinement seems like entrapment, an unbroken promise of languishing death. But inside that restrictive shell, the caterpillar dissolves and recombines, sculpted by an unseen architect into wings and new purpose. Likewise, your darkest hours can be the crucible in which your identity fractures and recombines. The heat of despair melts rigid self-images, and in that fluid state you can fashion a self more authentic, more resilient, and more attuned to your deepest longings. That said, unearthing the hidden gift demands intention. It's not enough to weather the storm. You must lean into its vortex, eyes open, ready to receive. Imagine a hiker battered by wind and rain who, instead of huddling under a tree, studies the direction of the gusts to chart a safer route home. In the same way, you can learn to read the weather patterns of your internal storm, identify recurring themes, note where your energy spasms with fear, and mark the moments when compassion starts to seep through the cracks. Start by naming the specific lesson each painful event offers. Did a failed relationship reveal boundaries you'd never set? Did job loss illuminate a skill you undervalued? Did betrayal expose a blind spot around trust? Write these down, no matter how small or silly they seem. Each item on your list is a shard of gold mined from the rock of your suffering. Over time, these insights coalesce into a compass you can follow, guiding you toward choices aligned with your authentic self instead of habitual fear. You might worry this process feels too coldly analytical, as if you're dissecting your soul on a metal table. But the act of naming is an emotional salve. By articulating what you've learned, you reclaim agency. Instead of being a passive recipient of misfortune, you become the author of your narrative. That shift in stance, seeing yourself as a seeker of wisdom rather than a victim of circumstance, untangles the knots of hopelessness and replaces them with a quiet sense of empowerment. In the midst of crisis, the very act of pausing to look for gifts can feel like a betrayal of your pain. You wonder, am I minimizing my losses? Am I pretending everything's fine? But reframing isn't about ignoring suffering, it's about refusing to let suffering have the final word. It's an act of defiance against the notion that pain is invincible. By choosing to see purpose in your difficulty, you acknowledge hurt even as you assert that hurt will not define you indefinitely. Practical examples abound. A person diagnosed with chronic illness might discover an untapped passion for advocacy, forging community with strangers who understand in a way friends never could. An entrepreneur whose business collapsed may unearth a latent talent for creative problem solving, which blossoms into a venture far more aligned with their values. A traveler stranded by a canceled flight could stumble upon an unexpected friendship in an airport lounge that transforms their perspective on human kindness. Each story echoes the same theme: adversity is the seedbed for gifts you couldn't have received any other way. Emotion swirls around these revelations, oscillating between gratitude and grief. You might feel thankful for the lesson but still mourn the cost. That tension is the fertility on which growth thrives. Allow yourself to feel both, to grieve the loss of what was and celebrate the arrival of what might be. In that alchemy of paradox, you discover that joy and pain can coexist. The sweetness of newfound insight tastes all the richer precisely because of the bitterness it emerged from. An existential dilemma emerges. Can we truly regard suffering as a teacher without glorifying or trivializing it? The answer lies in balance. To romanticize pain is to betray compassion for yourself and others. To treat pain solely as a problem to be eradicated is to miss its revelatory power. The hidden gift resides in neither elation nor despair, but in the nuanced meeting point of both, the space where raw vulnerability ignites profound growth. Once you've gathered these insights, the next step is integration. It's one thing to list lessons on paper, it's another to weave them into daily life. Choose one insight and put it into practice immediately. If you learned that boundaries protect your well-being, politely decline an obligation that drains you. If you discovered a passion for creativity, dedicate 15 minutes each morning to sketching or journaling. By acting on your newfound truth, you cement its presence in your identity. The gift stops being theoretical and becomes a living force in your world. This is where the real magic happens. You begin to see yourself not as a broken survivor of circumstance, but as a curator of your own evolution. Each action aligned with your lessons becomes a brushstroke on the canvas of your reinvention. Slowly but steadily, you reshape your life in accordance with the wisdom gleaned from adversity. The hidden gift blossoms into palpable change, more aligned relationships, purposeful work, and a grounded sense of self that no external storm can uproot. But don't rush the process. Digging for hidden gifts can stir up old wounds that need tending. The paradox is that growth often demands discomfort. Just as a sapling must push through compacted soil to reach sunlight, your insights may emerge alongside fresh pangs of vulnerability. When they do, treat yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a friend. Acknowledge the sting, wrap it in gentle reflection, and then revisit your list of lessons. In time, even the discomfort will reveal further layers of meaning. Reflection calls you here. What unexpected insight has your darkest moment offered? Maybe it taught you the value of self-compassion. Perhaps it helped you distinguish genuine connection from toxic attachment. Or it might have revealed a capacity for resilience you never credited yourself with. Whatever your gift, name it. Celebrate it. Use it as a lodestar in moments when old fears try to lure you off course. The power of your hidden gift lies in its ability to remind you that you're not at the mercy of circumstance, you are an active participant in shaping your destiny. As you stand at this crossroads, you might feel a surge of hope mingled with lingering doubt. That's natural. Transformation is never purely linear. You'll oscillate between confidence and uncertainty, between leaps forward and tentative steps back. Yet each time you return to your list of insights, you reinforce the foundation of your renewal. You remind yourself, the gift isn't a one-time epiphany but an ongoing conversation between your emerging self and the lessons you've harvested from hardship. So carry these hidden gifts forward. Let them inform your decisions, guide your relationships, and shape your vision of what's possible. The pain that once threatened to consume you now serves as a reservoir of wisdom, an inner archive you can draw upon whenever life tests you again. And because you've learned to mine adversity for its treasures, you'll face future challenges with a discerning eye, eager to uncover the next facet of your evolving masterpiece. Yet even as you integrate these gifts, new challenges loom ahead. Resilience must be forged, not assumed. The foundation you've laid through insight now needs reinforcement through daily practices that solidify your newfound strengths. How will you cultivate the inner fortitude that transforms occasional breakthroughs into lasting change? In the next part, you'll discover the practical rituals and microactions that will transform vulnerability into unwavering resilience, and ensure that your hidden gifts become your greatest allies on the path forward. Part 4, Forging Resilience. After mining the hidden gifts buried beneath your darkest moments, you arrive at a curious crossroads. The revelations you've harvested feel powerful, yet you sense that true transformation demands something more than insight alone. The hidden gifts are like seeds scattered across fallow ground, promising, but inert until you cultivate the soil. This is the realm of resilience, the alchemy that transforms raw potential into unshakable strength. Resilience isn't a mythical endowment bestowed upon a chosen few. It's a skill honed through ritual, intentional practice, and the willingness to lean into vulnerability. Here, you confront the paradox that the most unbreakable spirit often emerges from the deepest fractures. When everything else has crumbled, you can learn to build brick by brick a fortress of self-belief, one microaction at a time. Imagine resilience as wrought iron, heated in the furnace of adversity, folded repeatedly, each strike of the hammer refining its grain, eliminating weak spots. In the same way, your spirit becomes tougher not by avoiding stress but by engaging with it in measured ways. Psychologist Angela Duckworth points to the power of grit, the blend of passion and perseverance that predicts long-term success. Neuroplasticity research corroborates that our brains rewire themselves with repeated habits. Small, consistent efforts reshape neural pathways. The question is no longer whether you have resilience, but whether you're willing to earn it, moment by moment. Are you prepared to establish tiny rituals that, over time, will accumulate into the stamina required to navigate any storm life throws at you? To begin forging that resilience, start with micro-commitments, simple, non-negotiable acts that require minimal motivation yet deliver disproportionate returns. Perhaps you vow to take 30 seconds each morning to breathe deeply and offer silent recognition to your own presence. Or you decide to jot 3 things you did well the previous day, no matter how trivial. These acts are the equivalent of a blacksmith's initial strikes, neither flashy nor grandiose, but foundational. As Aristotle taught, virtue lies in habituation. By doing small virtuous acts repeatedly, you become virtuous. Each micro-ritual sends a ripple through your self-esteem, convincing your mind that you are reliable, capable, and worthy of your own trust. Of course, skepticism whispers that these tiniest gestures are too trivial to matter in the face of overwhelming challenges. Yet consider the flywheel principle described by Jim Collins. Tiny pushes accumulate until the wheel turns faster and builds unstoppable momentum. In the early stages, progress seems invisible, an invisible strength accumulating beneath the surface. But one day you'll notice the difference. When stress arrives, you won't crash. Instead, you'll flex, adapt, and bend without breaking. That moment of emergent resilience often arrives unexpectedly, as you realize you responded to a setback with curiosity rather than fear, patience rather than panic. Another key to forging resilience is anchoring these micro-commitments to existing routines, leveraging what psychologists call habit stacking. If you've already brushed your teeth each morning, attach a 30-second breath-counting exercise to that familiar cue. If you check your phone before bed, transform the final notification scroll into a gratitude review. Identify one lesson you learned that day and one person you're thankful for. By weaving resilience practices into the fabric of your daily life, you sidestep the common pitfall of relying on willpower alone. Willpower is finite, habits are automatic. You'll find that what began as awkward, deliberate actions soon flow seamlessly, empowering you to face adversity with a steady heart. Yet resilience isn't merely a solo endeavor. While individual rituals build inner fortitude, our social nature amplifies and sustains that strength. The Stoics emphasized the importance of community in cultivating virtue, and modern studies link strong social bonds to improved stress resilience and overall well-being. Think of your network as reinforcing bars in concrete, steel rods that give structure and tensile strength. When you commit to a daily check-in with a supportive friend, share a brief moment of appreciation with a family member, or join a small group bound by mutual encouragement, you embed your personal rituals within a matrix of relational support. This interconnected web bolsters you when the winds of hardship grow fierce. But forging resilience demands more than passive social consumption. It calls for mutual reciprocity. Vulnerability researcher Brené Brown reminds us that true connection arises when we both give and receive support. When you volunteer to listen to someone else's struggle, you practice empathy and reinforce your own capacity for courage. The act of extending a hand affirms both parties' resilience, yours, because you exercised compassion amid your own trials, theirs, because they experienced the power of genuine presence. Each act of shared vulnerability knits threads of trust that can catch you when your own spirit wavers, preventing you from slipping back into isolation or despair. Even so, it's natural to wonder whether resilience can ever reach a point where you're impervious to pain or hardship. The answer lies in distinguishing endurance from resistance. Endurance implies stoicism, gritting your teeth and refusing to feel. But resilience embraces emotional fluidity. You learn to feel deeply, process emotions, and recover more swiftly, not suppress them. Just as a well-tempered steel spring absorbs impact and then returns to shape, you become someone who experiences the full arc of feeling without collapsing under its weight. This capacity doesn't eliminate pain, but it shortens its duration and preserves your ability to operate with clarity and purpose. To cultivate this emotional resilience, consider adopting a brief reflective practice each evening. Review the day's emotional highs and lows, name what you felt, and allow yourself a moment of compassion. Perhaps you note frustration at work or joy in a friend's laughter. By labeling emotions, you activate the brain's prefrontal cortex, which helps regulate amygdala-driven stress responses. Over time, you'll notice a reduction in reactive outbursts and an increase in intentional responses. You become less like a leaf shaken by every gust and more like a deep-rooted tree whose branches sway but whose trunk remains steadfast. In addition to emotional check-ins, physical rituals anchor your resilience in body as well as mind. A brisk morning walk or a short series of stretches can recalibrate your nervous system, boosting endorphins and signaling to your brain that you're ready to face the day. Some find that a cold water splash or a 2-minute cold shower invigorates both body and mind, forging a visceral sense of control over discomfort. These practices may seem minor, but they build what neuroscientist Dr. Wendy Suzuki calls mental fitness, the ability to summon calm focus when adversity strikes. Remember, a resilient mind has a resilient body beneath it. The forging process also demands periods of rest and restoration. Endlessly hammering iron without quenching it in water creates brittle steel. Similarly, relentless productivity without pauses leads to burnout and diminishes resilience. Schedule brief sabbaticals, moments to close your eyes, breathe deeply, or step outside for fresh air. Embrace micro-rests as crucial as micro-commitments. These intentional pauses signal to your nervous system that you're not at constant war, allowing deep resilience to emerge from balanced rhythms of effort and recovery. As you adhere to these daily rituals, micro-commitments, habit stacking, emotional labeling, social reciprocity, and physical anchoring, you'll soon sense a shift in your core. Confidence blossoms not from grand triumphs but from countless small victories, the relief of a paused breath, the warmth of shared empathy, the clarity after a restorative pause. Each instance affirms your capacity to act purposefully despite discomfort, reinforcing neural pathways that distinguish you from the version of yourself who once surrendered at the first sign of challenge. At the heart of this process lies an existential question: is resilience something you're born with, or is it forged through intentional living? The evidence tilts strongly toward the latter. While genetics and early environment shape your baseline, the most impactful factor is the narrative you choose to rehearse daily. By embracing micro-rituals as acts of self-authorship, you rewrite your identity from "I'm fragile" to "I'm relentlessly adaptable." You become both the blacksmith and the forge, sculpting a spirit that not only endures but thrives in the crucible of life's trials. Which micro-action could shift your trajectory today? Perhaps it's a morning intention whispered over a cup of tea, reminding you of your commitment to presence. Maybe it's pausing mid-afternoon to send a note of gratitude to someone who bolsters your resolve. Or it might be a 2-minute stretch before bedtime, honoring the vessel that carries you through each challenge. Choose one, do it consistently, and watch how that simple act germinates confidence that no external setback can uproot. As this newfound resilience takes shape, you'll find yourself ready to scale higher peaks and traverse deeper valleys without losing faith in your core. Yet even the most fortified inner citadel benefits from external alliances. The next chapter of your journey explores how connection weaves into resilience, turning and fortifying every brick you've laid. Because no matter how steadfast your spirit becomes, the company you keep can elevate your strength exponentially. In the upcoming part, you'll discover the power of shared struggle and collective triumph, and how the threads of relationship can reinforce the fortress you've worked so diligently to build. You've spent time hammering out your inner strength, forging resilience with purpose and persistence. Yet even the hardest steel needs more than heat and hammer, it needs other elements to give it balance. You may stand firm alone when the winds howl, but storms are easier to weather when you're tethered to something or someone beyond yourself. That's the paradox of rock bottom. It strips you bare, then reminds you that true ascent rarely happens solo. The power of connection is the invisible reinforcement that transforms your solitary resolve into a shared fortress of hope. Isolation feels safe when you've been burned by disappointment. It seems logical to retreat behind self-reliance, to whisper, "I can handle this alone." But every human being is wired for relationship. Studies in positive psychology show that our capacity to cope with adversity skyrockets when we feel understood, seen, and supported. Even our neurons respond. Mirror neuron research reveals that witnessing empathy activates the same reward centers as receiving a gift. In other words, kindness isn't just a moral nicety, it's biochemical fuel for survival. Think back to the moment you first hit that jagged bottom, when every option felt depleted and hope was a cruel joke. Perhaps you recoiled, tightening your defenses, convinced that vulnerability equals weakness. Yet if you'd whispered your fear to a trusted friend or reached out to someone who'd weathered similar darkness, you might have felt the tension ease, just enough to breathe again. A single shared confession can break the gravity of despair, like a rope thrown across a chasm, offering a lifeline where you once saw only emptiness. Vulnerability researcher Brené Brown reminds us that connection is born in the crucible of vulnerability. By exposing our cracked places, we invite others not just to witness our suffering, but to hold it with compassion. When you confess, "I'm terrified I'll never climb out of this," the listener doesn't plaster over your fear with false cheer. They meet you in your raw honesty and say, "I see you, and you matter." That acknowledgement is a radical act of solidarity, a tacit promise that you won't face the darkness alone. Philosophers from Aristotle to contemporary thinkers have emphasized that humans are social animals. Our flourishing depends on webs of relationship, familial bonds, friendships, mentorships, even the casual smile from a stranger. Viktor Frankl's time in concentration camps taught him that the chance to love and to be loved gave prisoners the will to endure daily horrors. When extreme suffering stripped away every worldly comfort, it was the memory of a beloved face, the hope of reunion, that kept him alive. Connection, he discovered, is perhaps the highest meaning we can pursue in crisis. Yet we often sabotage this vital resource. Shame convinces us that our pain disqualifies us from compassion. If I admit how low I've sunk, people will judge me, pity me, or abandon me. So we swallow our story and retreat, turning isolation into self-punishment. Meanwhile, the loneliness amplifies the ache, reinforcing the belief that no one could possibly understand. But suffering only grows lonelier when it's hidden. Sharing it dilutes the power of shame and invites perspective, the realization that you're not uniquely broken, that the human family bears similar scars. Turning shared pain into collective strength requires intentionality. It can begin with a simple question: who in your life holds the thread that can pull you up? Maybe it's an old friend who's known you through triumphs and failures alike. Maybe it's a colleague who once confided their own struggles over a coffee break. Or perhaps it's a support group, virtual or in person, where strangers trade stories and uplift each other with the currency of empathy. Identify that person or community and reach out with a brief message: "I need someone right now. Can we talk?" You might fear that this ask will burden them, but true friends want to help. They'll feel honored that you trust them enough to share your vulnerability. And if someone can't respond the way you hope, remember, the issue isn't your worthiness, but their capacity at that moment. Keep searching until you find the ears and heart that match your need. Every time you offer your truth to a caring listener, you weaken the isolation that feeds despair and strengthen the bond that fuels renewal. Connection also deepens when we shift from seeking help to offering it. Solidarity isn't a one-way street, it's a network of give and take. When you share your story, you naturally invite permission for others to share theirs. You become a mirror for their experiences, reflecting back their courage in facing hardship. Let yourself ask, how can I support you? even when your own cup feels low. That gesture creates reciprocity and reminds you that resilience isn't a solo trophy but a communal web that holds us all. Imagine your network as a spider's web, delicate in appearance but astonishingly strong when properly woven. Each strand represents a relationship, family, friends, mentors, peers, even acquaintances. A single strand can't bear much weight by itself, but together they distribute tension and absorb shocks. When you suffer, the vibration ripples through the web. If the strands are intact, the force dissipates, and you remain poised. If the connections fray, the web tears and you feel the full force of impact. Nurturing those strands, checking in, listening, sharing victories and setbacks, ensures your safety net holds when you need it most. This concept isn't abstract. Consider the story of a woman who lost her job, her confidence plunging with every rejection letter. She joined a small community workshop on career transition, initially out of desperation. There she met others in the same boat, exchanging tips on resumes 1 minute, venting frustrations the next. When her own morale dipped, a fellow member reached out privately to say, "I believe in you. Let me review that cover letter." That single act of kindness sparked a surge of momentum. Soon she landed interviews she never imagined and rebuilt her professional identity, powered by shared commitment. Even brief encounters carry weight. A friendly barista who greets you by name, a neighbor who offers to water your plants when you're away, they may seem inconsequential, but they stitch warmth into your daily life. Research in social neuroscience shows that small, positive interactions boost oxytocin levels, which reinforce trust and social bonding. Over time, these micro-moments accumulate into a reservoir of goodwill you can tap when deeper crises arise. You start to believe that connection is woven into the fabric of existence, not a luxury reserved for moments of triumph. But what about when you've burned bridges or distanced yourself so long that the web seems irreparably torn? Repair is possible. A heartfelt apology can reknit a strand. A candid explanation of why you withdrew, even if it's awkward or painful, can invite understanding. People tend to judge harshly less than we fear. Often they're relieved to know where you've been rather than imagining you abandoned them without reason. The risk of reaching out again is far less than the certainties of continued isolation. Healing relationships can mirror healing the self. Both require honesty, vulnerability, and time. The existential dilemma here is profound. Must we suffer alone to prove our worth, or can vulnerability become the gravestone of shame and the cradle of connection? The answer emerges in our collective stories. When we let go of the myth of self-sufficiency, we discover a paradoxical freedom. By admitting we need help, we reclaim agency over our narrative. We shift from silent martyrdom to communal authorship. You realize that your worth isn't measured by your capacity to endure hardship privately, but by your willingness to invite others into the process of healing. Practical steps crystallize from this understanding. Start by drafting a brief note to someone you trust. "I've faced a setback and could really use your perspective." Keep it simple. You don't need to recount every detail, just enough to open the door. Then schedule a time to talk or meet. If verbal conversation feels too intense, consider writing an email or text. Some people find typing their thoughts less threatening than speaking them aloud. The format matters less than the act of reaching out itself. Each time you break the silence, you strengthen both your link to that person and your belief in the sufficiency of support. In parallel, cultivate broader communities that resonate with your values. Volunteer in a cause that matters to you. Join a book club or an exercise group. Attend a workshop or meetup around a passion. These environments foster incidental connections, casual camaraderie that can deepen when life gets hard. Shared interests lay the groundwork for empathy because you already have a topic to rally around. From that common ground, you can transition to more personal conversations when the time is right. Emotional tension naturally arises when you open up. You might tremble, swallow hard, or feel tears prick your throat. That's all part of the process. The moment vulnerability peaks is the very point at which someone else can step in with presence and compassion. And that tenderness, someone listening without judgment, simply holding space, can be more healing than any tidy solution. It reminds you, at your core, that you matter and that your suffering is not a burden but a bridge between human hearts. As connections deepen, you witness a transformation arc. Shared pain alchemizes into collective strength. The conversations that begin with awkward admissions often evolve into mutual encouragements, strategic brainstorming, and practical assistance. You find people offering resources you'd never have discovered alone, invitations to networking events, recommendations for therapists, suggestions for self-help books or podcasts. This networked approach accelerates recovery because you're tapping into the collective wisdom and goodwill of many, rather than the limited vantage of one. There's also a beautiful symmetry in reciprocity. When, down the line, someone else hits their low point, you're equipped to extend the same lifeline you once received. You've practiced listening with empathy, offering honest perspective, and celebrating small wins. In that role, you reinforce your own resilience while nurturing theirs. You see firsthand how connection can break cycles of despair, and each success story strengthens your conviction that rock bottom need not be a tomb but a threshold. Yet even robust personal webs have their limits. There will be moments when friends are unavailable, communities shift, or you simply outgrow certain relationships. Those gaps can trigger anxiety. What if I'm left without support again? The key is to recognize that connection extends beyond individual people to include something deeper, a sense of belonging to something larger than yourself. It could be a spiritual tradition, a creative collective, a movement for social change, or a commitment to service. These broader affiliations become anchors when personal networks waver. Consider, for instance, the mycelial networks of a forest floor. Beneath the surface, fungi connect trees in a vast web of exchange, sharing nutrients and information. When one tree is attacked by pests, chemical signals flash through the network, warning neighbors to bolster their defenses. You, too, can tap into subterranean layers of belonging, the energy that flows through shared values, collective purpose, or spiritual kinship. These forces remind you that your individual struggle resonates with a tapestry of lives united by common meanings. So I invite you to reflect, who in your life holds the thread that can pull you up? Which relationships shimmer with the potential to transform your isolation into solidarity? And beyond those personal ties, what larger community, cause, or tradition can you lean into when the noise of individual voices falls silent? Naming these connections isn't merely an intellectual exercise, it's a map of the lifelines available to you, ready to be activated the moment you need them. As you gather these threads, you begin weaving a safety net that transcends any single connection. You cultivate a resilience that is both personal and communal, anchored in the understanding that no one climbs alone and no one falls in complete solitude. Collective strength emerges from the alchemy of shared stories, mutual compassion, and aligned purpose. In that fertile soil, your individual transformation finds support, amplification, and continuity. Yet even as you celebrate the power of connection, another resource beckons from just beyond the human circle, a deeper wellspring that lies within you and beyond you at once. It's a force that summons you to redefine not only whom you lean on, but how you orient your life's compass altogether. In the next chapter, you'll discover how this inner-outer nexus, the emergence of a renewed self from the ruins, becomes the ultimate lever for rising beyond rock bottom. Stay with that question, for the journey upward continues. You've traveled through the abyss, navigated the echo chamber of self-doubt, unearthed the hidden gems of insight, forged resilience in the daily fires of micro-commitments, and woven a network of connection that cradles your battered spirit. Now you stand at the threshold of emergence, no longer the person you were when you first hit rock bottom, but someone tempered by adversity, newly attuned to the cadence of your own heartbeat, ready to step into a life shaped by purpose rather than fear. This is the moment when the rebound begins, and paradoxically, it can outshine every triumph you've ever known. When you rise from your lowest point, you do so not by reclaiming old victories, but by pioneering fresh ones that bear the stamp of every hardship you've overcome. At rock bottom, life stripped you of pretense and demanded authenticity. You'd spent years chasing external markers, titles, possessions, approval, only to discover that when it came to survival, none of them mattered. In those final, desperate hours, what remained? A raw capacity to feel, to choose, to breathe. That distilled essence is the fuel of your resurgence. The decision to rebuild from that place of naked vulnerability is what makes your comeback inherently more potent than any previous success built on shaky foundations. You're not merely returning to who you were, you're inventing a new self, shaped by lessons that only the abyss could teach. Yet embracing a new identity can feel unsettling. The you who once fit into familiar roles, student, partner, professional, has dissolved, like frost under a spring sun. In its place stands someone untested in the arenas you once mastered. Suddenly, you've traded certainty for possibility. An existential question looms: can you accept yourself in this fluid, uncarved state? Will you dare to surrender the safety of your former labels and lean into the not yet known person you're becoming? The answer lies in how you approach the blank canvas before you, with trepidation or with the thrill of an artist on the brink of creation. Crafting that new life vision begins with a simple yet profound shift, from asking what will save me, to asking what will I create. Salvation suggests passivity, as though someone or something will pull you out of darkness. Creation demands agency. It invites you to become co-author of your destiny, wielding the pen of intention to sketch a life in vivid strokes. Start by naming the values that resonated most deeply when everything else faded, perhaps authenticity, compassion, curiosity, or freedom. These aren't generic ideals, they're the compass points that emerged from your crucible. Let them guide the shape of your aspirations, the relationships you cultivate, and the work you undertake. As you articulate this vision, practical choices anchor it to reality. If curiosity surfaced as a beacon, carve out a weekly hour for exploration, reading philosophy, learning a language, experimenting in the kitchen. If compassion became your lodestar, volunteer with an organization whose mission resonates. Schedule these actions with the same diligence you apply to your resilience rituals. Each commitment is a brick in the foundation of your renewed self. Over time, what began as a fragile blueprint solidifies into a living structure, a life that reflects not the demands of others, but the core truth you reclaimed from rock bottom. Passion follows purpose. When your daily tasks align with your deepest values, motivation ignites organically. You'll find yourself drawn to projects that once felt onerous now brimming with promise. A morning commute may transform into a pilgrimage to a workspace where you feel seen. Conversations with colleagues shift from transactional to soulful exchanges. The mundane becomes infused with a quiet magic because you're no longer performing, you're co-creating. It's in these moments, writing that first chapter of your new venture, planting seeds in a community garden, mentoring someone in the shadow of their own despair, that you realize success isn't a destination, but a continuous unfolding of meaning. Peace, too, enters the equation, though it often arrives unannounced. You won't find a moment of perfect stillness, free from all agitation, but you will recognize intervals where your mind no longer races with what if, and instead hums with what now. In those pauses, you appreciate the simple fact of existence, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the steady rhythm of pulmonary exchange, the silent gallery of memories that taught you how to survive. Peace isn't the opposite of struggle, it's the recognition that, even amid turbulence, you are capable of meeting each wave with poise born of previous reckonings. Of course, the path forward isn't a straight line. Old fears may rear their heads when you least expect it. A setback at work can trigger that familiar lean towards self-criticism. A disagreement with someone you care about can uncover traces of shame you thought you'd banished. These moments are not evidence of failure but invitations to practice your new identity in rehearsal. Each time you catch the mind spiraling, you are presented with the opportunity to choose differently, to pause, acknowledge the discomfort, and respond in alignment with the self you're actively creating. Over time, those pivots become second nature, and your emerging identity grows in integrity and depth. In the quiet hours, just before sleep settles in, you might reflect on how far you've come. The voice that once whispered you're not enough now sounds distant, like an echo from another era. You recognize that your resilience isn't a shield you bear to fend off adversity, but a dance you lead with life itself, sometimes guiding, sometimes yielding, always attuned to the rhythm of growth. You may still stumble, but you stumble forward, never back, because the forward momentum of your new identity carries you beyond the gravitational pull of old patterns. So I invite you to pause here and consider, how will you define your next chapter, now that you've touched bottom and returned? What stories will you tell yourself and the world about who you are and what you stand for? What daily acts, no matter how small, will you commit to so that your life narrative aligns with the values you've reclaimed? The questions themselves carry transformational power. By contemplating them, you stake a claim on your own evolution, refusing to drift aimlessly on currents determined by past hurts or external expectations. And yet, before you rush ahead to the next milestone, know that one final challenge awaits, a test designed not to trip you up, but to cement your transformation. It will ask whether you can hold space for your new identity when external validation is absent, when fatigue tempts you to revert, when the world around you seems indifferent. That challenge will beckon in a moment of crisis yet to come, inviting you to stand at the edge of possibility once more and choose the self you've painstakingly forged. It's the ultimate litmus test. Will you honor the person you've become when everything conspires to make you forget? Keep that question close as you step forward. In the next and final part, we'll confront this ultimate trial together, unveiling the last piece of the puzzle that turns rock bottom from a harrowing ordeal into your enduring ally. Will you be ready when the moment arrives to stand firm in your renewed self and claim your last resort? The answer will define not just this chapter, but the entire epic of your becoming. You've arrived at the threshold where meaning and action entwine, where every lesson you've excavated from suffering comes to bear on the canvas of your unfolding life. Here, in the residue of all your trials, you stand poised between who you were and who you will become. This juncture is more than a waypoint, it is a summons to commit, to stake your identity on the hard-won truths you've unearthed. The blacksmith's forge of adversity has heated your resolve, the silent spaces of insight have tempered your vision, the network of shared vulnerability has reinforced the beams of your spirit. Now, the final act awaits, integrating these elements into a living mosaic of purpose, passion, and peace. Remember the hidden spark that flickered when you first touched bottom, the whisper that urged you to begin instead of surrender. That same spark is the ember at the heart of your next chapter. It beckons not with flamboyant fireworks, but with quiet insistence. Dare to treat rock bottom not as a tombstone, but as your last resort, the final refuge where all other illusions have fallen away and only the essentials remain. In that stripped-down clarity, you gain access to an authenticity you never could have cultivated amid comfort or distraction. Your lowest point becomes the crucible in which your deepest values shine brightest. What does it look like, in practical terms, to embrace rock bottom as ally? It means leaning into the discomfort of simplicity and truth rather than retreating into grand narratives of victimhood or false triumph. It means asking yourself, when the weight of life feels unbearable, what is this moment teaching me about what matters most? Instead of fleeing from the question, you let it root you in purpose. You refuse to allow past hurts to define you. Instead, you allow them to refine you, stripping away the superficial layers until your core intentions glow with unshakable clarity. This is the point where reflection must give way to action. Insight without application risks becoming intellectual vanity. Resilience without direction can harden into brittle pride. So here is your practical challenge. Within the next 24 hours, identify one concrete step that aligns with the values you've reclaimed from your journey through rock bottom. It might be a brief conversation you've been postponing, an honest check-in with someone who matters. It might be a modest ritual, a 5-minute practice of gratitude, a note to yourself celebrating the smallest victory. It could be a fresh commitment, a few paragraphs sketching the vision for your next project, or an invitation to join a group that shares your emerging purpose. Whatever it is, make it specific, make it time-bound, and then follow through. Why 24 hours? Because immediacy transforms intentions into proof of possibility. The longer you delay, the more your fears and old habits will whisper that later is an acceptable substitute for now. But acting promptly dazzles those whispers with evidence. You can choose differently. You can honor the promises you make to your own spirit. You can prove, in the tangible realm of time and commitment, that you're not at the mercy of old patterns but the architect of your unfolding story. As you take that step, pay attention to what stirs within you. Notice how even the smallest victory, checking off that task or honoring that conversation, ripples through your sense of self. You'll feel a pulse of confidence, the unmistakable rhythm of a person aligned with their own truth. That sensation is your lodestar, a living affirmation that transformation is possible and that you are its agent. Yet I want to leave you with one more provocative question, one designed to linger in the silence of your next low moment, when you are tempted to give up again. When the weariness of life tries to lure you back into resignation, will you remember this moment, this commitment to treat rock bottom as your last resort and launchpad, and choose differently? In the hush before you make that critical decision, will you recall the texture of your resolve, the taste of your own defiance, and draw upon the collective strength you've woven with others? Will you let the memory of this inner pledge rise, like a tide that carries you beyond the undertow of despair? You may not have an answer to that question immediately, but its power lies in the invitation to stay awake to possibility. It plants a seed in your subconscious, a seed that will sprout when you need it most. Each time you encounter struggle, from the mundane frustrations of daily life to the seismic shifts that threaten to unmoor you, the echo of this challenge can remind you that you carry a reservoir of resilience, insight, and solidarity ready to be tapped. So I offer you this final affirmation: your rock bottom is no longer a void to be feared but a wellspring to be celebrated. It is the mother of your authenticity, the midwife of your reinvention, the crucible of your finest self. The abyss you once dreaded has become your most trustworthy guide, because it stripped away all that was unnecessary and left you with nothing but your raw, unvarnished essence. In that space, you discovered a clarity of purpose that no external accolade could ever match. Carry that clarity forward. Let it shape the contours of your days, the vocabulary of your thoughts, and the trajectory of your dreams. When the world around you clamors for your attention with its seductions and threats, return, always, to the core you've excavated at rock bottom. There lies the authenticity that will keep you grounded amid any storm. There resides the flame that will continue to burn, no matter how fierce the winds of doubt may blow. This is your moment of reckoning and of promise all at once. You've seen the end of the road and chosen to take the path less traveled, the path that arcs upward from the depths. Now, step onto that path with conviction. Make your promise to yourself visible through action. And when adversity knocks again, and it invariably will, remember that you have an arsenal of strategies, a tapestry of connections, and an inner voice of intuition that have been forged in the fires of your own descent. These are the gifts that rock bottom bestowed upon you. So go ahead, take that step in the next 24 hours. Then stand back and watch how the world shifts, even if only just a fraction. Feel your spine straighten, your heartbeat steady, and your vision clear. Then hold fast to the question that will define your journey. In the moment when giving up seems the easier road, will you choose differently? Will you draw upon the lessons you've gleaned, the strength you've built, and the connections you've woven to keep pressing forward? The answer lies within the echo of your own resolve. Here, at the edge of your new beginning, you are more than your past failures, more than your darkest fears. You are the sum of every moment you've dared to breathe in spite of them. Embrace that truth. Let it propel you beyond the confines of your history. And know this, the same rock bottom that once threatened to bury you has now become your last and greatest resort, the origin point of a life reinvented by courage, purpose, and unwavering self-belief.